Hey, my name is Ethan. I'm 32. 3 months ago, I was just an operations guy who showed up early, kept my head down, and stayed invisible. Then one night I returned my boss's lost cat to her Beacon Hill townhouse, and she stood in the doorway in a sweater with her hair down and asked me, "What reward do you want? One night, maybe?" I thought she was joking, until I realized the bell on that cat's collar kept chiming every time I crossed a line I swore I wouldn't. She was married. She was wealthy. And the last thing she whispered before closing the door was, "Sometimes I need proof someone would come." If you're watching this right now, tell me where you're from in the comments. Because I still don't know if what we did was wrong. I stood on Claire Whitmore's brownstone steps at 12:47 in the morning, holding her cat wrapped in my jacket, and I could hear a car door slam somewhere down the street. My chest went tight. Daniel. It had to be Daniel, her husband, coming home early from whatever charity gala or business dinner kept him out until the city went quiet. I pressed myself against the brick pillar beside her door, feeling Nell's bell collar chime softly against my ribs like a tiny alarm I couldn't silence. The rain had soaked through my shirt. My shoes were ruined. And I was standing outside my boss's house after midnight like some kind of... I didn't even have a word for what I was. The car engine faded down another block. Not hers. Not him. I exhaled, and the sound came out shaky. That morning, I'd been nobody. Just Ethan Cole, operations lead, invisible, careful. The guy who showed up early with cheap coffee and kept his head down and made sure the logistics ran smooth so people like Claire Whitmore could make million-dollar decisions without worrying about loading dock schedules. I took the same train every morning, 6:42 from Alston. I bought the same coffee from the cart outside South Station. Black, no sugar, $1.50. I nodded at the same security guard when I swiped my badge in the lobby, and I took the stairs instead of the elevator because it felt less presumptuous somehow. The office was glass and steel and elevator chimes that sounded like quiet judgments. Claire was untouchable. CFO 44. Married to a man who looked like he'd been assembled in a boardroom. She wore tailored everything. Sharp lines, expensive fabrics, heels that clicked like punctuation marks. And she smelled like lavender. Not perfume. Hand cream, maybe. Something faint and deliberate that lingered on documents after she'd touched them. I'd been working there 2 years, and I'd maybe spoken to her directly 5 times. That afternoon, I'd stayed late finishing a shipment reconciliation report. The office had emptied out. Marissa, her assistant, gone by 6, the finance team by 6:30. I liked the quiet, liked the feeling of finishing something solid while the city outside turned orange through the windows. I was heading to the loading dock to double-check a pallet count when I heard it. A bell. Soft, persistent, coming from somewhere near the dumpsters. I crouched down, squinting into the shadows between 2 parked trucks. And there she was. Small, gray, skittish. A cat. Her fur was matted, and she had this little brass bell on a bright red collar that kept chiming every time she shifted her weight. "Hey," I said quietly. "You lost?" She bolted. I stood there like an idiot, listening to the bell fade into the alley. Then I saw the tag, dangling from the collar she'd left behind when she squeezed under the fence. Nell, and an address that made my stomach drop. Beacon Hill, Claire Whitmore's street. I stood there holding that tag for a full minute, trying to decide what kind of man I was. I bought cat food from a corner store on the way back. The cashier, some college kid with earbuds in, barely looked at me when I asked what kind cats liked. "I don't know, man. The cheap stuff?" I bought 2 cans and a paper bowl. When I got back to the loading dock, Nell was sitting on top of the dumpster like she'd been waiting. I opened one can, set the bowl down, and backed up 10 feet. She didn't move. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Finally, she crept down, one paw at a time, and started eating. I checked with the security guard in the lobby. Gene, I think his name was. But he just shrugged when I asked about lost pets. People don't usually bring their problems to the front desk, brother. I thought about emailing Claire. Professional. Safe. But it felt wrong. Too distant for something this small and specific. So I called the number on the tag. It went to voicemail. Her voice. Clipped. Formal. Controlled. "You've reached Claire Whitmore. Leave a message." I didn't. I couldn't leave the cat outside overnight. It was starting to rain, and Nell looked too thin, too fragile. So I found a cardboard box in the loading bay, lined it with my scarf, frayed, gray, familiar, and carefully lifted her inside. She didn't fight me. I walked to Beacon Hill in the rain, rehearsing sentences I'd never use. "Hi, I'm Ethan from work. I found your cat." "Ms. Whitmore, I wanted to return. I didn't mean to bother you at home, but..." It took me 20 minutes to walk there in the rain, and the whole time, the bell on her collar kept time with my heartbeat. Mapped narrative progression through key romantic scenes and maintained tonal consistency. Good start. I'm at about 800 words. I need to continue through the key scenes. Arriving at her townhouse. The awkward reward conversation with the title line. Next day at work, the texting begins. His scarf goes missing. Late night visits. The espresso conversation. I need to maintain the tone. Short sentences, sensory details, that aching quality. Let me continue. Her street was quiet. Expensive cars parked like sleeping animals. Porch lights warm and steady. The kind of neighborhood where people said townhouse instead of house and meant it. I stood on her steps for 30 seconds before I knocked. When Claire opened the door, she wasn't the woman from the office. Her hair was down. She wore a sweater. Soft, cream-colored, the kind you pull on when you're alone and nobody's watching. No makeup, no armor. She looked human. "Ms. Whitmore," I started. "I'm Ethan, from work, operations. I found your cat near the loading dock, and I..." "Nell." Her face shifted. Relief first. Then something I couldn't read. "You found Nell?" "Yeah, she's okay, just a little scared." Claire stepped back, opening the door wider. "Please, come in just for a second." I shook my head. "I can just set her inside the..." "Please." So I stepped into the entryway. Hardwood floors, a fireplace I could see through an archway. Everything pristine and quiet and too perfect. I set the box down carefully. Nell climbed out, shook herself, and walked straight to Claire like she'd never been gone. Claire crouched down, running her hands over Nell's wet fur, checking for injuries. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Thank you," she said quietly. Then she looked up at me, and there was this brittle half-smile on her face. "What reward do you want? One night, maybe?" The air went still. I didn't know if she was joking, testing me, trying to diffuse the awkwardness with something sharp and deflective. I cleared my throat. I don't want anything, Ms. Whitmore. I'm just glad she's safe." Claire stood slowly, studying me like she was measuring the kind of man I was. Like she'd asked that question before and gotten different answers. "You're sure?" she said. "Yeah." She nodded. "Then, thank you, Ethan." I stepped back onto the stoop, and she closed the door. But not right away. She lingered behind the glass for a beat too long, and I felt the weight of her watching me walk away. The lock clicked like finality. I told myself it was done. One strange moment, then back to normal in the morning. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. My shoes were still damp. I kept my head down, swiped my badge, took the stairs. The elevator chime felt louder than usual. Claire appeared around 10. Impeccable again. Hair perfect. Suit sharp. Heels clicking. She passed my desk without looking at me, but I caught the faintest glance. A flicker. There and gone. Marissa, her assistant, was everywhere that day. Efficient, friendly, watching everything. I overheard her on a call near the break room, laughing about some charity dinner Claire and Daniel had attended over the weekend. "They're such a beautiful couple," Marissa said into the phone. "Honestly, goals." I buried myself in logistics reports. At 4:30, I got an email. From Claire Whitmore. Subject? No subject. Thank you. C. That was it. 2 words and an initial. I stared at it for 5 minutes. Then I closed my laptop and tried to forget. I stayed late that night finishing a shipment audit. When I finally left, the office was dark except for the emergency exit signs and the hum of the HVAC system. My phone buzzed as I reached the street. Unknown number. She ate. Nell. 6 words. 6 words. And I was right back on her doorstep. I sat in my apartment that night with cheap takeout going cold on the counter, staring at my phone. Rain tapped the window like it was trying to tell me something. I replied carefully. Glad she's okay. 30 seconds later, a photo loaded. Nell curled on a pristine white couch, the kind of couch I'd never owned. The kind you couldn't sit on without feeling like you were trespassing. I zoomed in. The collar tag looked new, cleaner than the rest of her. I dismissed it. Then I couldn't. I typed, "How long was she missing?" The reply came fast. "Long enough." Those 2 words felt heavy, like they meant more than just a lost cat. I went to bed, restless. Woke up the same. The next afternoon, I was asked to deliver documents to Claire's office. Marissa let me in, smiling that efficient smile that never quite reached her eyes. Claire's desk was immaculate, folders stacked, pens aligned. But there, in the corner, was a small cat toy, bright red, out of place. Claire thanked me without meeting my eyes. When I left, I realized my scarf was gone. I couldn't remember if I'd carried it home. I tore apart my apartment that night looking for it, checked the closet, under the bed, the laundry basket. Nothing. My phone buzzed. Nell is clingy. I stared at the message, trying to keep it professional. Is she usually like that? Not with everyone. I sat there, reading that line 5 times, trying to decide if she meant the cat. The next day, I walked past Claire's street on my way home from the gym. Told myself I was just checking if I'd dropped the scarf somewhere. Tom Reyes, the building doorman, was outside adjusting a planter. Older guy. Calm. The kind of presence that made you feel like he'd seen everything and judged nothing. "Everything all right?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, just thought I dropped something around here." He studied me for a moment. "You look like you're searching for more than a scarf." I froze. He smiled faintly. "People lose things all the time in this neighborhood. Most of them find what they're looking for eventually." I walked away without knocking on her door. Behind me, Claire's porch light flicked on, then off. I went home empty-handed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the light had been for me. The next morning, I was asked to stay late. Claire needed an operations summary for a conference call, something routine, nothing urgent, but it had to be done after hours. Marissa left last, giving me a look that lingered too long. The office emptied. The city outside turned dark. Claire emerged from the conference room around 8, looking tired. Not performing. Just tired. "Thank you for staying," she said quietly. No problem. She hesitated. There's espresso in the break area. Would you want some? I should have said no. I said yes. We stood by the espresso machine, and the silence wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy. She made 2 cups, handed me one, and leaned against the counter. How's Nell? I asked. Restless. Claire stared into her cup. It's strange, how quiet a house can be. I didn't ask what she meant, I just listened. She looked up at me, and for a second I saw something crack. Do you ever feel like you're living beside your own life? Before I could answer, the elevator chime rang, sharp, sudden. We stepped apart like we'd been caught doing something wrong, even though we'd only been talking. The touch lasted less than a breath, but the drive home felt like I'd stolen something. That night, I lay in bed replaying the way her fingers had brushed my sleeve when she'd stopped me at the elevator. Barely a second. Barely anything. My phone buzzed. Nell won't stop crying at the door. I suggested food, toys, familiar scents. Would you just come for a minute? I wrestled with boundaries. Told myself I'd stand in the doorway only. For the cat. I arrived before midnight. Tom Reyes saw me coming and opened the outer door without a word. Like he understood more than he should. Claire was calmer with me there. Nell circled my ankles, bell chiming softly. I noticed the tag again. Bright. New. When did you get this collar? I asked. Claire answered too quickly. Recently. And that's when I knew. She hadn't lost Nell by accident. This was a test, to see who would return her, to see how. I looked at Claire, and she looked back, and neither of us said it out loud. At the threshold, she repeated the reward idea in softer words. If you ever wanted something, you could ask? I said quietly. I won't. I left. I walked home with my hands in my pockets, and the worst part was how proud I felt for saying no. The next morning I arrived at work determined to reset. Claire was ice, perfect, cold. We passed in the hallway, the elevator, the break room. Every time, the lavender scent. Every time, silence. Marissa started asking questions, casual ones. Do you live near Beacon Hill? No, Alston. Oh, I thought I saw you over there once. I deflected, smiled, lied politely. That night I got a text. Thank you for last night. Then, after a long pause, don't reply. I didn't reply, but I stared at the message until the screen went dark. I walked that night to clear my head, ended up on her street without meaning to. Daniel's car was parked outside, sleek, black, expensive. I felt hollow. Tom Reyes stepped outside for a routine check. He saw me standing there and walked over slowly. This neighborhood hears everything, he said. Not unkind, just factual. I left immediately, ashamed. At 3 a.m. I woke to a notification. A photo. Nell's empty food bowl. No caption. It was nothing. And it felt like an invitation. The next morning I replied with a single practical suggestion about a different food brand. Safe. Professional. I regretted it instantly. At work, Claire called me into her office for an operations update. Marissa was there at first, taking notes, her pen moving efficiently across a legal pad. Claire's tone was strictly professional. Eyes tired but voice controlled. When Marissa stepped out to print something, Claire's voice dropped. I shouldn't have involved you. I kept my face neutral. You didn't. I found a cat, that's all. Claire studied me like she was deciding whether she could trust my restraint, whether I'd protect her or destroy her. The silence stretched. Marissa returned, and Claire's mask snapped back into place. That evening, a building maintenance issue kept me late. Water leak on the 3rd floor, nothing serious, but operations had to coordinate with facilities. It gave me a plausible reason to be near the executive floor after hours. I didn't plan it. But when I saw Claire still there, alone, lights dimmed in her office, I didn't leave either. She appeared in the break area unexpectedly. We shared espresso again. The conversation shifted without either of us meaning it to. "Daniel travels a lot," she said quietly, staring into her cup. "Charity galas, conferences, he's very good at being seen." I said nothing. "We have these dinners," she continued. "Beautiful restaurants, expensive wine, and we sit across from each other like strangers performing a play." I thought about my own life. Small apartment, frozen dinners, being the responsible one. Never the chosen one. "Do you ever feel like you're living beside your own life?" she asked again. I couldn't answer. The elevator chime interrupted. Sharp, startling. We separated like we'd been caught doing something wrong, even though we'd only been talking. The next morning, Claire was back to immaculate. I felt whiplash. At lunch, I overheard 2 co-workers near the vending machines. "Did you hear about the Beacon Hill thing?" "What thing?" "Neighbor complaints, late-night visitors or something. People walking around at weird hours." My chest went tight. They weren't talking about Claire specifically. But the fear primed itself anyway. I decided to set boundaries. Drafted a message. "I can't be your late-night help anymore." Before I could send it, Claire texted. Nell slipped out again. "I can't find her. It was believable. Cats did this. My boundary broke." I was back at the loading dock that evening, searching alleys with a small bag of food, feeling ridiculous and desperate. Nell's bell chimed somewhere in the dark. I followed the sound like it was pulling me by the ribs. I found her under a parked car, coaxing her out slowly. My hands shook from cold and nerves. I brought Nell to Claire's townhouse again, earlier than before, still risky. Tom Reyes clocked, the time and the repeat pattern. "You should be careful," he said gently. Claire opened the door, relief flooding her face, almost undone. "Thank you," she whispered. Inside the entryway, she finally admitted part of the truth. "I bought the new collar because I was afraid she'd disappear forever." She paused. "Sometimes I need proof someone would come." I realized it connected to everything. The test, the staged feeling. "Stay for tea," she said. "Just 5 minutes." I should have said no. I said yes. I told myself it was 5 minutes. I didn't admit what part of me was hoping it would be more. Claire's kitchen was warm. Soft light. Tea steeping. Nell sprawled between us like a referee. This was where everything shifted. Claire wrapped her hands around her cup, and I noticed how tightly she gripped it. Like she was holding herself together. "The one-night thing," she said quietly. "When you first brought Nell back." I waited. "It wasn't what you thought." She looked up. "It wasn't seduction. It was a test, a loneliness experiment." I didn't speak. I wanted to see if men only want something from me, if kindness exists without expectation. Her voice cracked slightly. "I'm tired of being handled by everyone. Managed, controlled." I leaned forward. "I don't want a reward." Her hands shook as she tried to light a candle on the counter. The match slipped. She cursed softly, reaching for the box again, and caught her knuckle on the drawer edge. Blood welled up. Small. Real. "Here," I said quietly. I took her hand, cleaned the cut with a paper towel, wrapped it carefully with a Band-Aid from the drawer she pointed to. And then, without planning it, I rested my forehead against hers. One breath, no kiss, no escalation, just closeness. Just proof that tenderness could exist without taking. We separated immediately, both frightened by how intimate that tiny contact was. "You should go," Claire whispered. Not harsh, terrified. I left, stepping into the night with the taste of tea and regret. I walked home and realized my scarf still wasn't with me, like part of me had been left behind on purpose. The next day at work, Claire wouldn't look at me. The contrast was brutal, surrounded by people, by glass walls and elevator chimes, and Marissa's watchful efficiency. I tried to act normal. Failed. Marissa was unusually present, hovering near Claire's office, placing herself between us in subtle ways. That evening, I got a text. "Thank you for the bandage." I replied once. "Anytime." I regretted it. Later that night, Claire called. Not texted, called. "Nell is restless," she said. I hesitated. I had to stop this. Had to. Then the building-wide alert came through. Water leak on a lower floor. Operations needed to verify something. Plausible. Professional. I told myself I was going to the office. I ended up outside Claire's townhouse anyway, after midnight, holding cat treats like an excuse, approached the door, and heard a key in the lock from inside. The sound of that key turned my blood cold, because I knew it wasn't Claire coming home. Daniel entered the townhouse unexpectedly early. I was on the front steps, frozen, holding a small bag of treats like an idiot. I reacted fast, stepped down into the shadows by the side stairwell, pressing myself against the brick. Claire appeared in the doorway behind Daniel for 1 second. Her eyes widened when she saw me. She didn't speak. Daniel was distracted by his phone, texting someone, barely paying attention. It gave me a slim window. I slipped around the side, heart hammering, only to run into Marissa by the gate. She was there because she'd forgotten documents for an early morning meeting. Plausible. Chilling. Marissa looked down at my shoes, then up at me. She smiled like she'd just filed something away. I escaped into the rain, breath ragged, feeling the full weight of what I'd been doing. My phone buzzed. "Don't contact me again." It was only one sentence, but it sounded like a door slamming in my chest. The next morning, I went to work on no sleep. Claire was ice. Wouldn't meet my gaze. Daniel appeared at the office unexpectedly. Polished, arm around Claire's shoulder in public. Marking territory. Marissa was hyper-efficient, controlling access to Claire like a gatekeeper. Later that day, I was asked by a manager to provide building access logs for a minor security review. Routine. Plausible. I panicked that late-night badge data could reveal patterns. I complied carefully without drawing attention. But the fear spiked. That evening, I got home and searched for my scarf again. Closets, drawers, everywhere. Like if I found it, I could undo the last month. I slept in short, ugly pieces, waking up every hour like my body was still listening for keys. The next day, no texts from Claire. The silence became its own presence. I checked my phone too often, walked past Claire's office by accident, reread old messages, then deleted them. I bumped into Tom Reyes after work, passing Claire's street on the far sidewalk. "You look like you haven't eaten," he said gently. I asked if he'd seen Nell. Tom said only, "I see a lot." That line haunted me. Later, I overheard 2 neighbors outside a cafe. The Whitmore house has been so quiet lately. I heard footsteps, late at night, on the side stairwell. I realized the neighborhood was a living camera. That night, I drafted a resignation email. Didn't send it yet. Just stared at the cursor like it was a cliff edge. I told myself I'd decide tomorrow, because tonight, deciding felt like admitting. The next morning, I woke early, determined to end the spiral. At the office, Daniel was there again. Rare. Charming to everyone. Then he asked me a simple question about operations while maintaining steady eye contact. He knew I existed now. I felt hunted. Near the break room, Marissa cornered me. "Beacon Hill is beautiful at night," she said softly. She didn't accuse. She tested. I kept my face neutral. "If you ever need advice navigating executive spaces," she offered, either recruiting me as an ally or warning me she could ruin me. I returned to my desk, opened the resignation email, finger hovering over send. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. No words, just a photo loading. The image appeared slowly, line by line, like something surfacing from deep water. Nell sitting on Claire's porch, wearing my missing scarf like a nest. Timestamp 2:03 a.m. Text: "Porch light is on." I spent the day shaking, trying to function. I didn't reply, couldn't. I decided I'd go tonight, not for romance, for closure. I prepared carefully, left work at normal hours, took a different route, phone on silent, internal rules, no staying long, no stepping inside, no touching. I ate a small dinner I barely tasted, showered, changed into plain clothes. Late that night, I approached Claire's street. The porch light was on, steady, unmistakable. Tom Reyes saw me, didn't stop me. I climbed the steps like I was walking toward a confession I hadn't earned. My scarf was folded neatly on the porch chair beside Nell, set out intentionally. The bell collar chimed as Nell rubbed against my leg. Claire opened the door just enough to speak. She looked exhausted, eyes rimmed red, controlled posture cracked. She didn't apologize dramatically. She stated facts. "Daniel suspected something. I panicked. I pushed you away to protect your job, and my life." I admitted I'd considered quitting. "Don't," she said quietly. Not a command. Like she didn't want to be the reason I lost myself. We agreed on boundaries. No late-night visits unless truly about Nell. No messages that could be misread. No touching. We stood close enough to feel warmth. But we didn't cross the line. The intimacy was in restraint. In honesty. Claire placed her hand briefly over the doorframe near my shoulder. Close, but not on me. "Thank you for bringing her back. Every time," she whispered. She closed the door gently, not slamming it. I walked down the steps with my scarf in my hand, and the porch light stayed on behind me. The next morning I woke with a different kind of ache, less frantic, more tender. At work, Claire was professional, but not cruel. She met my eyes once, brief, controlled, but real. Daniel wasn't there. Marissa watched the exchange and smiled faintly, noting a shift. She quietly offered me a schedule correction that kept me away from Claire's office for a while. Protection or control. I accepted to reduce risk. Later, Tom Reyes texted me, "Porch lights off today." I felt both relief and loss. That evening, I received a text from Claire. "Daylight hours, safe tone. Nell's vet appointment is tomorrow. Could you recommend a carrier? You seem to know what calms her. It was ordinary. That was the point. And still, my hands shook. The next day, I sent Claire a practical recommendation and a calming tip. Blanket, familiar scent. I kept it brief. The day passed in ordinary rhythms. Workday professionalism. A brief hallway moment where Claire's lavender scent passed, and I stayed composed. Marissa testing boundaries with harmless comments. Me choosing restraint. Repeatedly. After work, I walked by Claire's street once, not stopping. Just confirming the porch light was off. Respecting the boundary. Later that night, at home, I received one last small message. Nell is asleep. Thank you. I didn't reply immediately. I sat with it, then replied with one safe line. Good night. No romance words? No promises? I stood by my window, scarf draped over a chair, rain starting again. In the distance of my mind, The porch light existed like a possibility, not a demand. We never named it. And maybe that's why it survived. Because some doors don't swing open, they just stay cracked with the porch light on. Some stories don't end, they just go quiet. Subscribe for the next confession.